On this episode, two medical mysteries that defied the experts.
She looked like nothing we'd ever seen before.
The doctor's eyes went from normal to about the size of a ping pong ball.
What's going on? What are we looking at? Why is one leg bigger than the other?
When Elena Diagnosis is born with a series of shocking birth defects, her entire family is forced to face a frightening reality.
I was terrified because I didn't know if she was going to live.
We called a lot of friends and said it's time for prayer.
Then, Adam Brewer is the picture of health until a mysterious illness threatens to kill him within a matter of days.
It was a real struggle just to breathe.
I have never heard Adam cry like that. It scared me so much that my knees buckled and I went to the floor.
In the fall of 2003, Andy and Tyra Gallus were happier than they'd ever been. They had just moved into a new home in Zanesville, Ohio, and were looking forward to filling it up with children.
We both wanted a family with a white picket fence happiness kind of thing that everyone wanted.
He was happy, and they were a nice couple together.
When I found out Tyra was pregnant in December 2003, I was very excited.
I was like, okay, let's go. We want to be the normal grandparents. We want to spoil this baby rotten.
I always wanted to be a dad. Was just ready for the moment to be there, that we'd actually be one big family.
Andy would tell us that the doctor said everything looks good, going as scheduled.
Nothing could have prepared the family for what happens next. Just a month before the baby is due, Tyra begins experiencing severe labor pains, and Andy races her to the hospital.
The doctor had come into the room to give her a shot to calm down her labor and stop everything. And I told the doctor that we should probably do an ultrasound, make sure everything was okay. I just wanted them to look and just see what was going on, because clearly the little one didn't want to be in there no more. After a little bit of a heated discussion, he decided just to make me happy, he'd go get the ultrasound machine. When they did the ultrasound, the doctor's eyes went from normal to about the size of a ping pong ball.
According to the images, the baby is in distress. To save her child's life, Tyra will need to undergo an emergency C-section.
Tyra was scared when they told us about the emergency C-section. It was just hurry up and get to the other room as soon as you can.
Andy rushed out just long enough to tell us. The look of shock on his face spoke volumes. Just 1,000 thoughts run through my head all at once.
The medical team whisks Tyra away to the OR. And within minutes, Elena Diagnosis is born, weighing 6 pounds, 8 ounces. And it's clear that something is very wrong.
The first time that I saw Elena, it was quite a shock. She looked like nothing we'd ever seen before.
You could definitely tell that one leg was noticeably bigger and a little longer, and some of her toes were fused together. I was very concerned at the time, but I knew if I freaked out, everyone else was going to start worrying.
Her skin had purplish marbling to it in a design, actually kind of a checkerboard square. It was feelings of numbness to look at her and think, what's going on? What are we looking at?
But before the medical team can even begin to assess the newborn's bizarre appearance, Elena suddenly stops breathing.
I was excited to be a dad when they'd first taken Elena out, and then instantly terrified and scared because you could tell that she wasn't breathing, she was barely moving.
Elena's lung has collapsed, and the medical team is racing to re-inflate it.
It was the longest wait I think I've ever waited through, because we thought, is our granddaughter going to make it?
The family watches helplessly as Elena is transferred to the neonatal intensive care unit.
After Elena was stabilized in the NICU, Andy came out to the waiting room to his mother and I. Emotionally, he broke down. He was really choked up.
The doctors couldn't tell us exactly what was wrong with Elena because none of them had seen anything like that at the time, and they had no clue of what was wrong with her. and they decided to do a few CAT scans to see if they could narrow down what had caused everything.
And they were kind of consulting back and forth with other colleagues.
But with each passing day, the medical team is no closer to understanding Elena's case. Each and every test comes back normal.
We decided not to go home because we figured it was a lot easier to be there at the hospital than be 8 miles away, just in case anything did happen. So me and Tyra stayed in the waiting room for the next few days. When we went to the waiting room to stay in there was a couch and a few chairs. And since Tyra had to have surgery to have Elena be born, I let her sleep on the couch and I slept on the floor for a couple days.
At that time, I think Andy was doing very well with handling the stress with all the information that he had just been given in a short amount of time.
Totally overwhelmed, the young parents do the best they can to keep it together.
Tyra was doing pretty good during the majority of this when there was other people around, but when she was on her own, you could tell it was worrying her a lot. She just was keeping it to herself. It was a scary moment because I was staying strong and not showing any emotion to keep everyone else hopeful and not worrying about nothing. But on the inside, I was terrified because I didn't know if she was going to live.
Finally, after 10 agonizing days, the doctors have a solid theory.
They finally said, this is what we believe she has.
And they diagnosed Elena with Kickball syndrome.
Kickball syndrome, or KTS, is an incurable genetic disorder in which the blood and lymphatic vessels grow uncontrollably. Purplish skin, fused toes, and enlarged limbs are common, and in severe cases, heart failure can occur.
When they told us the diagnosis of KTS, of course it was shocking because we thought, oh my, what is that?
I wanted to know what all caused this and is there any way to take care of everything. I was worried about not knowing what her future was going to hold, if she was going to be able to live the normal life of a little girl, if she's going to be able to play sports if she wanted.
Even more disturbing is the prognosis. Elena's leg could keep growing until it becomes so big she wouldn't be able to use it and would ultimately need an amputation.
It seemed like time stood still, not knowing how to handle it.
That really hit home and hit hard. We were deeply concerned about Elena. Andy pretty much just said, why has this happened? What have I done so wrong that I deserve this punishment? And our response to him was, this is not a punishment. You need to look at this as a gift, because that's what she is.
When we found out that there was no cure for KTS, we got scared. It was even more alarming to know that the disease could get worse.
We called a lot of friends and said it's time for prayer because we didn't know what the next step was.
"10 days ago, Elena Diagnosis was born with a bizarre condition. Her toes are fused together, her skin is marbled with strange purplish hues, and most shockingly, one leg is visibly bigger than the other. Now her family has just been told that she has KTS, an extremely rare genetic disease.
When they told us the diagnosis of KTS, of course it was shocking.
While they will have to watch Elena for potential heart complications, the medical team is confident that her health is stable. And 2 weeks after her birth, she's discharged from the hospital.
I was overly excited to finally get to go home and just start working on being a family and getting even closer. But it was no shorter than we left the hospital. The excitement of taking her home did change. The sheer terror of not having a doctor over your shoulder that could help you just in case something did happen.
Eventually, the young parents are able to relax and settle into life as a family of 3.
I love kids to death, so it was pretty easy to step in and be dad. She gave me a lot of joy, a lot of energy. I'd come home, me and Elena play on the floor. So we were very hopeful for her when she got older, that she'd just be normal, crazy like her dad.
We would go to visit with them every week or so, and it was fun to go and play with Elena and watch her to see what types of advances she's making.
But it's not long before the infant's disease begins to take on a life of its own, just like the doctors predicted.
When Elena was around 3 months old, she was at home. We noticed that her leg had gotten about double the size it was when she was first born.
So that was a concern. We just sort of wondered what's going to happen.
We had a lot of friends that had kids and newborns, but they couldn't relate to the same things that we were going through. They would tell us, we know exactly how you feel, and we'd look at them in confusion and say, you have no clue what we're going through or how we feel and the questions that we have. And we'd eventually get a sorry from them, but it wasn't their fault. They didn't know any better.
In time, the stress of caring for Elena begins to take an enormous toll on the young parents, and they make a painful decision.
Me and Tyra were going through some difficult and stressful times, and realized the best thing for us and Elena and everything is if was just to get divorced and go our separate ways.
The stresses of a newborn and financial burdens alone would have been enough stress to drive anybody apart.
It was kind of a shock. I didn't expect it, but it was for the best.
Overwhelmed by the challenges of raising a special needs child alone, Andy decides to move in with his mother and father.
I was excited to be able to be there more for Elena and be able to help with some of the extra duties that come with having a special needs child.
Andy is especially grateful for his parents' help when the size of Elena's leg begins to affect her development.
Around the time Elena was 6 months old, we were noticing she was having a hard time sitting upright on the floor by herself. I was a tad worried and confused, so I took her to her family doctor.
The doctor explains that the bigger and much heavier leg is throwing Elena off balance and recommends she begin physical therapy.
They started her out with working with her motor skills and picking up blocks. It was a little sad knowing that she couldn't do everything she wanted to do as fast as she wanted to do it. I was worried, wasn't sure what was going to happen.
Over the next 3 months, the family does the best they can to help care for Elena, whose condition seems to be getting worse by the day.
You could really see that leg growing, and it was becoming even more obvious that it was much, much larger.
I was concerned for what was going on. It was more worry of not knowing the answers to the questions that I had.
And of course, our concern was, will she be able to stand? Will she be able to walk? Elena's doctors at the time were involved with NOVA, the National Organization of Vascular Anomalies, and they suggested taking her to the medical convention.
Just a couple of months later, Andy and his parents meet Tyra at the convention, hoping to learn more about how to help Elena.
We went expecting to get more information about how to provide her better care.
It was great to meet some of the families down there. They were very open to tell you their experiences.
We were able to see their children in different stages of development, so we felt more relieved about Elena's future.
They broke the convention down into groups so that the doctors could evaluate the kids individually.
They examined Elena and they looked at her and they said, "This child does not have KTS."
The team of medical experts is confident that the purplish marbling on Elena's skin is not typical of KTS.
It was a moment of shock. For so long had a name to put with it, but now we're back to square one pretty much.
Then all those questions come back. Well, what is it? Could this be life-threatening? What are we facing now?
It was back to the confusion of what's the outlook for this? Is it going to be something that's worse? We just didn't know at the time.
We felt like we'd just dropped back and started all over again with a whole new set of questions and no answers.
Their suggestion to us was to take her to the Cleveland Clinic. They do a lot of genetic work there.
Anxious to finally find out what's really wrong with Elena, the Galluses immediately make an appointment with Dr. Rocio Moran.
Dr. Moran put us very much at ease, and she made us feel we were part of the team. She valued our input right from the beginning.
We thought, okay, here's a doctor that's going to work with this little girl, and it's all about Elena now.
We spent a lot of time taking the initial history and all the different evaluations that she has had prior to seeing us. So we asked questions about other organ systems to see whether or not they might be involved. We obtained blood to screen for genetic disorders that might explain her medical problems.
Several hours later, the family heads home. And with each passing week, they pray that soon they'll have the answer they so desperately want.
So we knew that, okay, we're starting over. We're back to square one now, not knowing what this child has.
2 long months later, the findings are in.
I diagnosed Elena with a Proteus-like syndrome.
Proteus syndrome is an extremely rare genetic disorder in which parts of the body mature abnormally. In healthy individuals, genes act as a set of instructions for the body. They tell it how to grow and function properly. But in patients like Elena, her genes malfunction, causing unusual development.
The classic presentation of Proteus syndrome is the disproportionate overgrowth, and it needs to be asymmetric. So it's not that both your arms are affected or both your legs are affected, but it's really a patchy distribution of findings, as well as skin lesions that are abnormalities of the blood vessels, veins, or arteries. So this disorder is extremely rare, and it's pretty devastating. The one thing that most patients with Proteus struggle with are the physical deformities that are caused by the syndrome.
It's the same disease that afflicted Joseph Merrick, the Elephant Man, and the subject of the well-known film. He died when his head grew so big that the weight of it snapped his neck.
It sounded like it was out of a sci-fi movie. I just remember with the Elephant Man when I was younger, they'd take his growth out and it would eventually come back too, and things on him would change. It seemed like the stories were kind of close. It takes a good bit to scare me. It was a moment of shock.
It was one of those moments of starting over, having to learn about the disease all again.
I think there's a significant psychological impact of identifying a diagnosis, and I think the Galluses were relieved to be able to put the proper diagnosis to what was causing Elena's medical problems.
The Gallus family is grateful to finally understand that everything Elena has experienced since the day she was born, from her lung problems to the strange discoloration of her skin, is a direct result of the condition.
The physical manifestations of this disease are pretty obvious. Her blood vessels are not normally formed, so that can lead to the significant birthmark that we see on Elena's body.
Her most shocking symptom, the oversized leg, is part of the same pattern of excessive growth.
One of her legs was much larger than the other. The concern is that her limb asymmetry, or the unequal size of her legs, will continue to worsen over time. Because of the progressive nature of her condition, she may need to have her leg amputated if the growth is not stopped.
I freaked out because it was going to be my little girl.
Not only will her leg continue to expand in size, other parts of Elena's body will also grow, including her internal organs.
One thing that really scares us about Proteus is that things can change unpredictably in the body, and not knowing what could happen to Elena, it did scare us.
2-year-old Elena Gallus was born with mysterious deformities. Her skin is marbled with purple patches. Her toes are fused together, and one leg is much bigger than the other, making it impossible for her to stand up on her own. Elena's family has just learned that she suffers from Proteus syndrome, also known as the Elephant Man disease.
I was scared and worried, not knowing what the next answer was going to be.
One of our most significant concerns is her risk for clots and for having a fatal complication as a result of those clots. The blood clots usually go to the lungs, and they have what's called a fatal pulmonary embolism.
It kind of took me by surprise.
Dr. Moran explains that unfortunately, there is no cure for Proteus.
It's a feeling of uncontrol when you can't do anything to make somebody better.
So aggressive management is very important to keep Elena healthy.
It's imperative that the medical team keep a close eye on Elena so that they can help manage her condition. In addition, Dr. Moran encourages the family to continue taking her to physical therapy.
Elena reacted really good with physical therapy because she's a really big people person, so she just looked at it as a new person to play with. So she picked it up pretty quick and did really good.
And finally, more than a year after most babies, Elena stands up.
When we got to that milestone, it was a real celebration.
The first time I saw Elena stand up, it's just too hard to really describe.
She was just elated. She was tickled pink. It wasn't long after Elena got her first pair of shoes that she started working with her therapist, and they started using a gait walker.
And it was about the second or third day of her having it. She was walking all over the living room without any help, just holding on to her little walker. The first time Elena walked without her walker, we were all lucky enough to actually be in the living room when she was doing it.
We didn't think she would ever reach that point in her life either.
We were elated because that was the milestone that we were all concerned about.
Elena's progress is encouraging, but because her disease is so rare, there's no way to know how much she can accomplish.
The reality is that Elena has a disorder that affects the growth of her body. But at this point, we really don't know what the future holds for Elena.
And while the Galluses are grateful to finally have a diagnosis, they can't help but wonder why it took so long to find a doctor who recognized the disorder.
Many of these disorders have overlapping features, so what might be present in KTS may also be present in Proteus and may also be present in other overgrowth disorders, so that makes the diagnosis very difficult to make. There's probably around 200 people in the world with Proteus syndrome.
Today, Elena is a spirited and happy 6-year-old who participates in every activity she can.
She's a ball of fire. You can't keep her tied down to anything. I refer to her regularly as my partner in crime because we're always usually getting in trouble.
She has a therapy pony called Breezy that helps her with her balance, and she helps take care of Breezy. Nothing holds her back.
She even looks forward to her therapy that she has twice a week. We know she probably wouldn't be taking tap dancing if it wasn't for her therapist. She would have more difficulty in riding her horse if it wasn't for her therapist.
I think Elena's a very inspiring little girl who has overcome a lot of obstacles and a lot of struggles in her life and still manages to have a smile on her face.
I'm very hopeful of Elena's future. She has the world in front of her and she can take it by the hand and run with it.
Next, Adam Brewer is in a desperate fight for his life when his heart and lungs begin to suddenly shut down. In the spring of 2007, 18-year-old Adam Brewer was finishing his senior year of high school in the suburbs of St. Louis, Missouri. His parents were divorced, making Adam the man of the family. He often helped his mother care for his 3 sisters.
I was getting them to games on time, cooking them dinner, putting them to bed, and making sure they had all their clothes ready for the next morning, so when my mom got home, she didn't have to do that.
I am a parish secretary at a Catholic church, St. Angela Mercy, and in the evening I work part-time as a waitress at a restaurant.
When my mom took on that second job, I was really proud of her. It made me want to help out more because I knew she was struggling.
After graduating from high school, Adam starts attending community college. And the summer before his sophomore year, he takes a break from his responsibilities, going on a rafting trip with his friends.
We went down on a Friday night, just barbecuing, hanging out with friends. We fished throughout the day, went hiking, played in the water. Just being outside for me is real important.
Adam returns from the trip completely relaxed. And a month later, the fall semester begins.
I realized that this was a big year for me. I needed to do well to start setting my standards for what I wanted to do for the rest of my life.
But only a few weeks into the term, Adam is sitting in a math class when he's hit by an overwhelming wave of nausea.
I was nauseous to where I had to leave the class. And when I got into the restroom, I had a really bad case of diarrhea. Originally, I thought maybe I ate something bad or drank something that wasn't totally right. That night, I woke up in the middle of the night sweating really bad, as if I had just broken a fever. So I thought I was back to normal.
But over the next week, Adam finds that he's in and out of the bathroom constantly and starts to worry about his health.
Adam came to me and I was a little bit concerned, and I said, if this is still going on, you really should probably take yourself to the doctor.
He told me that there was stomach bugs going around, nothing too serious. He prescribed me with some antibiotics that were supposed to cure my symptoms within the next 2 to 3 days.
Sure enough, the problem clears up quickly. But a few days later, on a Sunday afternoon when Adam is playing kickball, an alarming incident occurs.
I was at a recreational kickball league that I play in. I wasn't able to run more than 15, 20 steps without having to stop and bend over, and it was a really struggle just to breathe. And the umpire stopped the game to tell me that he wanted me to sit out because he didn't feel right letting me run around the bases. And that really upset me because I was used to being able to play at a level with everybody else.
By the time Adam gets home that night, his condition has deteriorated so drastically that he can barely make it up the stairs.
He said, I'm really short of breath. I think I'm getting asthma. And I said, Adam, I don't think this is caused from asthma. I think there's something else going on. So we went back to the doctor. The first thing the doctor did was listen to Adam's chest with a stethoscope.
He told me to go down the hall and to get a chest x-ray. And I could tell by the look on his face that there was something going on.
The doctor came back into the office pretty quick and said, Adam, you have double pneumonia.
Pneumonia is an infection of the lungs, commonly caused by a virus. Shortness of breath and fever are typical symptoms. If left untreated, it can lead to organ failure, permanent lung damage, and even death.
The doctor told me that I had needed to go home and get as much sleep and rest as possible. Told me I should not be going to class, should not be working, should not doing any physical activities that would exert myself. He really didn't even want me walking up the stairs. He told me that it was a serious condition and that I should just get as much sleep and rest as possible.
And he said, I'd like to do some blood work to see if there's anything else going on, just to be sure. I got a phone call very early the next morning from the doctor with the blood test results. He wanted Adam at the hospital immediately. I broke down because I think it had really hit me that Adam has an illness that could be really bad right now.
When my mom attempted to wake me up, I was really exhausted and tired. I did not want to get up at all.
His reaction was, we'll go later, let me sleep a couple more hours. And I said, no, Adam, we have to go to the emergency room now. The doctor wants you there now. That was the first time that I was really, really worried.
As soon as they arrive at the hospital, the doctor explains that Adam's blood work results are highly abnormal. He's not sure what's going on and immediately orders a CT scan. The findings are nothing short of shocking.
The doctor told us that the fluid around my lungs and heart was contracting it and it could compromise it, so we would have to have an emergency operation to relieve that pressure and the fluid around it.
Adam's lungs are severely inflamed, and as the fluid continues to build up rapidly in his chest, a heart attack is possible at any moment.
When I heard that, I was a mess. I didn't know if Adam was going to live or die.
20-year-old Adam Brewer has just learned that he's suffering from a severe case of double pneumonia. Potentially life-threatening levels of fluid are flooding his chest cavity, and it's only a matter of time before his heart starts to shut down. With the clock ticking, the medical team performs an emergency procedure to prevent Adam from going into cardiac arrest.
It was just so overwhelming because it came on so traumatically and everything happened so fast.
He told us that they were going to go in put a tube in around my heart, and drain out as much fluid as possible. I was really nervous, didn't understand how this could happen.
I thought my 20-year-old son is in having a procedure on his heart, and he could die from this. I stayed at the hospital all day, from morning till night, and my family would bring the girls out to visit him because they wanted to see him as much as possible. They wanted their big brother to be healthy again, and I felt like I was so helpless.
I could see it in their eyes that they were scared if something serious could happen, if I wasn't going to be back at the house to help them ever again.
Over the next couple of days, the doctors continuously drain the deadly fluid. But nothing they do keeps it at bay.
When doctor after doctor after doctor continued to tell us that they did not know why his heart and lungs filled up with fluid, I was very frustrated.
They just kept coming back with more and more tests that needed to be run. They'd all come back negative, negative, negative. I mean, you depend on these people to tell you what is wrong with you. And at this time, they had no idea.
I felt like I was supposed to be the one that was finding someone to fix Adam. And I was getting very frustrated, and I felt very sad for Adam that I couldn't do that for him.
As Peggy watches helplessly, the medical team continues to run test after test, hoping to find some clue. Then, 7 days after Adam was admitted, the results of his latest round of blood work turned the case upside down.
When the doctor came in and talked to us about how high my white blood cell count was, she seemed really alarmed.
The accumulation of white blood cells indicates that Adam may be suffering from leukemia, a potentially deadly cancer of the bone marrow and blood.
The doctor decided that I needed to have a bone marrow biopsy taken to see if there was any chance that I had leukemia.
When the doctor told me that Adam might have leukemia, I could not believe that this was happening to my son. I thought, there's no way, this cannot be. It was very scary because to me, leukemia was something that Adam could die from. It was probably the scariest thing I've ever been through in my entire life.
She basically got on top of me and had to stick a needle into the side of my hip that went all the way down into the bone. It was one of the most painful experiences that I've had in my life.
I've never heard my son cry like that. My knees buckled and I went down to the floor and I was a mess. I was so scared for him.
During the week waiting for the bone marrow biopsy results, I tried to keep my mind off of, but it was tough to fall asleep thinking that there was a chance that it could come back positive. I just wanted them to come as quickly as possible.
I realized that at that time that Adam may have a life-threatening disease, and this might be, this might be the end of his life.
A week ago, 20-year-old Adam Brewer was admitted to the hospital when a deadly amount of fluid surrounded his heart and lungs. While doctors have no idea what triggered his rapid decline, they now suspect he's suffering from leukemia. Completely overwhelmed, Adam and his mother Peggy are waiting anxiously for the results of his bone marrow biopsy.
It started to settle in that there was a chance that it could come back positive. And I was thinking, what would my reaction be? How do I tell my sisters? It was really scary.
I was really scared. Then Adam was being the one that was strong for me. He was the one telling me, don't worry, it's gonna be okay, even though he didn't know that either.
When it finally came to the day of, it hit me that there was a chance that this could be positive, and I almost did not want to find out.
When the doctor came in and said, okay, I have the results of your bone marrow biopsy, it's negative for leukemia, I was so relieved. And Adam said, yeah, but Mom, now we still don't know what it is.
Desperate for answers, Peggy scours the internet for specialists. and finally comes across pulmonologist Dr. Lee Demertzas at Barnes Jewish Hospital. When he agrees to take on Adam's case, Peggy makes arrangements to transfer her son immediately.
When I met Dr. Demertzas, he convinced me that there were answers. He was very calming, and he was very confident in his work.
I could see all the testing that was done, and this helped me get a fresh perspective on what might be going on with Adam. The most important question to ask Adam and his mother were, in their words, to describe how this illness had evolved from the first time that Adam felt sick until the day that I met him in the clinic.
He just seemed very, very concerned with everything as a whole, saying that everything was all caused from one problem.
Putting the pieces together, Dr. Demertzas suspects he knows what Adam is suffering from. But to confirm his hunch, he must send a blood sample to the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control.
During the week, waiting for the result, my shortness of breath was still holding me back from a lot.
I was so scared because I thought this was going to go on, until Adam couldn't breathe anymore. And I was afraid that he wasn't going to be able to get over this.
20-year-old Adam Brewer has been suffering from a mysterious and life-threatening buildup of fluid around his lungs and heart, which no doctor can explain. Desperate for answers, his mother, Peggy Brewer, has taken matters into her own hands. She's tracked down a doctor who believes he knows what's triggered Adam's inexplicable decline. And now they're waiting for the results of a blood test that could confirm a diagnosis.
The day that I was supposed to get the results back, it hit me that there's a chance I could have some type of awful disease.
The week is almost unbearable as they wait for the findings to come in. And when they arrive, Dr. Demertzas sits down with them to review the verdict.
I told Adam and his mother about the blood test results and confirmed that Adam had paragonomiasis.
Paragonomiasis is an infection caused by the Paragonomus parasite. In some cases, the body's immune system is able to defend itself against parasites that enter the body. But in patients like Adam, the Paragonomus parasite overwhelms the body's defenses and multiplies inside the lungs. This can result in shortness of breath and a deadly buildup of fluid in the chest cavity.
The parasite is acquired by a human by eating raw or undercooked crustaceans, usually crabs or crawfish. Adam probably ate a crawfish that was just chock full of parasite, and it was just too much for his body to overcome.
After finding out that eating the undercooked crawfish had caused all these problems, I was very unhappy with myself.
I could not believe that a parasite, something that was so small you could not even see it with your eye, had caused so much damage to so many organs in Adam's body.
When the parasite was burrowing through the wall of his intestine, it was irritating his intestines and causing him to have diarrhea and flu-like symptoms and night sweats. When the parasite got up into his lungs and started irritating the lung, it caused Adam to feel short of breath. As part of the body's response to try to fight off this infection with a parasite, fluid built up around Adam's lungs and around his heart as well. Once the parasite makes it into the lungs, it's a very nice environment for the parasite to live and get all the nutrients that it needs to survive and to reproduce. So an adult worm can live inside a lung for up to 20 years and continue to produce eggs.
It's now all too clear that Adam's high white blood cell count was an unmistakable sign that a parasite had taken hold of his body.
The reason that white blood cell counts are high in people who have infections with parasites is that white blood cells are used to try to help the body kill the parasites.
But in Adam's case, the parasite had inundated his system, and it was only a matter of time before the infection would have caused irreversible problems.
If the parasite moves into the brain, it can cause a variety of symptoms, such as paralysis, seizures, and in the worst case scenario, if there's a significant amount of inflammation and swelling of the brain, it could even result in death.
Fortunately, this particular type of parasite can be completely wiped out. Dr. Demertzas immediately starts Adam on an intense course of medication.
Dr. Demertzas told me that I was going to have to take anti-parasite pills for 2 days, 15 pills a day, And then I would start to see improvements in all my symptoms within a week or two. Within 2 days, I felt completely back to 100%.
Adam won't have any lasting effects from this infection and will feel good as new.
While the Brewers are thrilled by Adam's recovery, they can't help but wonder why no one was able to recognize the disease sooner.
I think the main reason that it took so long to come up with the diagnosis in Adam's case is that Paragonomiasis in somebody who lives in the United States and hasn't traveled elsewhere is incredibly rare. This disease is almost always diagnosed in China and Southeast Asia. In fact, up until 2009, there are only 7 reported cases of Paragonomias in North America from people who had not traveled abroad or eaten imported foods.
I always saw crawfish as a little minuscule animal in the river. Never thought it could do this much damage to the human body.
Today, Adam is a healthy 21-year-old who is determined to live his life to the fullest.
I am playing sports, working, doing everything I was doing before this whole sickness. It feels great to be back to 100%.
I don't think there's a day that goes by that I don't think, do you remember when you thought Adam could die? And I try to look at that and live my life that way with all of my kids and appreciate them every single day.
Without the support of my family, I don't think I would have made it. We now are a stronger family than we were before.
I don't think you realize how lucky you are until you go through something this scary.
This experience has given me a deeper respect and gratitude for the medical field, and it's only pushed me more to want to join. I'm now in my junior year of school, and I'm taking classes towards becoming an emergency medical technician.
One lesson that I learned from the experience with Adam's illness is don't ever give up.
Although it's frustrating to keep receiving negative results, it's better to try than just to give up.